in today's video, I decided to just deep dive and talk all about my student teaching experience. We are now 2 months post student teaching, actually more like 3 months because I forgot I finished a month early before I graduated. So before I forget any details of my experience, I wanted to get this video out there for you guys because I watched so many YouTube videos before I started my student teaching experience of what to expect and how their experience was, and just to get a little bit of an idea before I jumped into it. Because if you are an education major right from the beginning of college, you obviously know that's what you're gonna have to eventually do your senior year, and thinking about it before it happening could be really intimidating and all that. So that's why I wanted to make this video for you guys, or even if you guys aren't education majors at all and just watch my videos and are interested in knowing a little bit more about how the student teaching process works, or just interested in hearing how it went for me, just keep watching. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into the video. Alright, so like I said, before I started my experience, I watched a lot of YouTube videos, and I had seen some where there were some horror stories where either they didn't get along with their mentor teacher, which is the actual grade level teacher who you're placed with and with the whole semester. So either they didn't get along with their mentor teacher, or a lot of times the mentor teacher would be of no help to them and kind of just have them run their own show, which of course could be really intimidating and pretty overwhelming when you're first starting out and it not being collaborative. So I was really worried about that, especially because in my program at U of A, before you start student teaching, I think this is at most schools, you do your practicum at an elementary school and get to work in different grade levels, either you choose or you're placed in, and get to work with the teachers that you're at before you actually start student teaching. So luckily at the elementary school I was placed at, we had majority of our student teachers in my cohort placed at that same elementary school. So a lot of people, before they even started their program or the student teaching program, they were able to work with someone that they had worked with previous, and they knew they got along with and it would be a good fit and all that. So it worked out great for them. So in my experience, we were able to request either our grade level and our teacher that we would want to be with for our student teaching experience. And I was with 2 different teachers my junior year, where I was placed in a first grade classroom with a teacher who I really loved, and second semester placed in a third grade classroom also with another teacher I really loved. Got along with both of them really well and were very helpful to me, and I thought either one of them I would want to probably work with. But for the first grade teacher that I requested was on my last list of the top 2, just because first grade is not the grade level that I would want to be in. The grade level that I'm interested in working with would be the upper grades of elementary, so 3 through 5 or 3 through 6. Well, at the time I thought 2 to 4, so I was okay, I'd rather work with the third grade teacher. So I requested her as my number 1 option. At the time, that was the grade level I wanted to teach. So I wanted to be placed in a third grade classroom and work with that grade level. So we did get our placements, I think about a month before we started student teaching. So I started student teaching my second semester, my senior year. So we got who we were placed with. So before we actually started student teaching, the first semester, so before the semester before student teaching, we were going to be working with the teacher that we were placed with. So right before we started, I got notified that I was placed in a 5th grade classroom and with a teacher that I didn't know. So I was pretty worried because I was I requested grade levels 2 through 4, and I was oh, 4th grade would be the oldest I'd go. So I was really nervous and intimidated by that because I just thought 5th grade was really intimidating. And at the time, did not want to be placed in 5th grade, but I was you know what, everything happens for a reason, maybe I'll end up loving it. And of course I was nervous because I have never met the teacher before and was nervous. Obviously you want to make sure you have somewhat of chemistry, and you get along well, and your teaching styles are ultimately very similar, so that way the methods you're learning align with your teaching philosophy. So as you guys know, during the pandemic there was virtual school, so we did not get to meet them in person. So I was working with my mentor teacher for the first semester of my senior year virtually. So we would get to Zoom and go online with the students whenever they would be Zooming. So normally it would be that my day was Thursday, so normally you would be in the classroom every week for a whole day on that Thursday, but because it was Zoom, technically it ended up only being maybe 2 hours, 3 hours, and there's always technical difficulties. So you obviously don't really get to know the kids that well, or even the teacher as well. So still, I was still pretty intimidated going into it and knowing how it was gonna go when I actually started in the spring semester. So, but it ended up going really well, and my teacher seemed really nice, and I was excited to start. So I ended up starting second semester in January, and right when I started, I went to school the first day, and my teacher was quarantining, so I didn't get to actually meet her there. So I was placed in another 5th grade classroom with 2 other student teachers, because at my school also, you were able to work with another person when student teaching, so if you requested it. And that was another thing, I did request to work with another person. I just thought it would be a lot more comforting to work with another person and learn from each other, so that I ended up getting placed alone. So when I ended up getting to work with the other 2 student teachers during those few weeks, it ended up being really nice in order to have that support and lean on each other. So like I said, I was placed with the other 5th grade class, with the other 5th grade teacher, and it was great. It was a first whole week, but even though it was really good and I liked it, I was really overwhelmed. And obviously that's to be expected. I think with anyone starting like a new job or anything that you're not used to, it can be super overwhelming, especially like obviously the teacher is very familiar with technology or like scheduling and all this type of stuff, or how meetings go and all that, but when you just are jumped into it for the very first time, it's very different. Because even when I would go in for school days, even half days or full days, it's still very different than fully being in it every single day for 8 hours a day. The first week I had like multiple breakdowns because I was like, this is super overwhelming. I remember the first week, the other 5th grade teacher that I was with just saying how we would be there usually like at 5 or 6 every day and leaving school at that time, and I just like felt like I was gonna have no life besides student teaching. So it was pretty like intimidating because I was used to like the first semester having so much free time, especially it was even heightened because of the pandemic and having virtual school. So I was just used to like just hanging out at home with my friends all the time. So it was just like a huge adjustment. So yeah, my teacher wasn't there the first couple weeks, so I was working with the other teacher in her classroom. So still, as other people had started working with their own kids and their own teacher, getting to know them, I hadn't got that experience yet. I was still 2 weeks behind because of that. And then once my teacher got back, my original mentor teacher, the other 5th grade teacher that I was placed with temporarily ended up having to quarantine as well for another 2 weeks. So the other student teachers that I was with ended up getting moved to my classroom. So still things weren't completely normal, because normally it would just be me and my mentor teacher and then them and their mentor teacher. But right now it was just like craziness the first like whole month of student teaching. So it definitely was not like anyone else's experience. It was pretty crazy. I remember feeling like some sense of relief at that time, because I was like, I'm so glad I get to work with these other people in my cohort, which I was friends with and knew before. So like it was nice, especially because we're always like, what are we doing? And obviously it was the first time anyone had done virtual teaching. So it was great being able to support each other with all of that. And then within that week of all of us being together, all of us student teachers ended up obviously testing, because we were testing regularly that whole time. And then a couple of our tests ended up coming out positive. So we had to quarantine, and I was student teaching from home. And yeah, so honestly, just my whole first month of student teaching was craziness, because things are constantly changing of us quarantining and virtual teaching and switching teachers, switching who we were with that entire first month. 2 weeks after I got out of quarantine, the school was going to be moving to a hybrid model. So it was great before that happened, and that before we got to move into the students having to be in person with us, I got to know my mentor teacher better, just the 2 of us for those couple weeks, and it was really great. I really liked her. And I asked a lot of questions. On all the videos that I watched about student teaching, so many of them say to ask a lot of questions. And one thing I didn't mention either is every day we had like a notebook that our teacher would give us. So every morning when we got to school, she would have a question or something to notice or take notes on throughout the school day. So it was really nice to be able to reflect and do that every single day. So I would respond to the question and she would reply to it, and we would just have this back and forth notes throughout the semester until kids came in person. Then we kind of went away with that just because there's not enough time throughout the day. But that's what we started off with, and it was great too because we had so much free time throughout the school day when we were virtual, just because of the gaps and all that stuff. So it was nice to have that communication and learning. So we got to learn a lot. We just got along really well, and I really aligned with her teaching philosophy. So within those 2 weeks, I kind of got more in the groove of things, because I remember while I was virtual, I taught my first lesson, and normally the first few weeks you're still like learning and doing just little tasks. So this is another thing I forgot to mention. Like the first day of student teaching, our teachers had like a sheet of paper and wrote down exactly how we'll be taking on more and more tasks until we are in full takeover. And full takeover is when you are completely the teacher and you're just completely doing everything on your own. So before you actually get to that, you're like taking on more and more tasks that lead up to that. So that way you know it's not all at once and you're like overwhelmed, but like you get more used to teaching lessons and then teach, like for example, teaching writing lessons first and then adding on writing and math, and then doing writing, math, and reading. So you kind of like build up to that. And so on my schedule, when I was supposed to teach my first reading lesson, it was while I was quarantining, and so I felt like it was really hard to not be able to communicate with my teacher in between and ask her little questions. It was just crazy. And I remember, I think it probably would have gone the same way even if I was in person, but I like totally felt like I bombed my first lesson I've ever taught. And everyone always says like you'll never forget your first lesson, and most people's like first lessons they ever teach are so bad. And I remember like wanting to cry after I taught my first lesson because I thought it went so horribly. And I remember my teacher being like, I was exactly in your shoes. I remember how that felt. Like, you're just gonna learn and get better. And from that point on, like I learned exactly what I don't want to do the next time, and like learn from the kids on how to make it a more interactive lesson and make it better. So from that point on, I learned from my mistakes, and every lesson after that was way smoother, and it was never as bad as that one. But I remember like my first ever shared reading lesson, my first ever math lesson, completely bombed it. And if that happens to you, completely normal, you'll learn from it. It happens to everyone. So I remember just also being just so nervous, of course. But as like within those 2 weeks and I was taking on more and more tasks, like I felt a lot more comfortable for when the students came back in person or hybrid model. So when the kids came back in the hybrid model, there's of course an adjustment because we had to move from the all online model, all remote model to the hybrid. So it was an adjustment period, but once I got in the routine of things, like I just started to love it. Like I noticed that like obviously that first whole month I was super stressed and overwhelmed, and I was just like not used to it. But once we did move into like students actually being in person and like actually being able to talk to them, I just like was excited every single day to like go in and teach. Like, and it was super rewarding because I was like, I always wanted to be a teacher. I wanted to be a teacher my entire life. So when you like are actually excited to do that every single day, it was really comforting and I loved it. So we were in the hybrid model for about a month. And then after the hybrid model, when we came back from spring break, we went into full in person. And again, I just loved it. It was so great not having to, first of all, reteach the same lesson. So we would have to reteach a lesson twice every time because of the cohort A and cohort B. And one of my cohorts was like pretty shy and quiet. So it was just very hard getting them to be interactive because my cohort A was super talkative and super energized. So it was just a complete 180 flip when I would teach cohort A and cohort B. So I had like half the week where I'd leave school feeling like it was such a great day, then half the other days being like, I don't know what the heck I'm doing. But I realized it had to do with, I think, energy levels. But anyway, that's just a side note. I just like noticed that. But yeah, so and then when we moved into the in-person model, it was so great. I got to experience being fully in person for the last month, and full takeover wasn't as scary as I had thought, because not only did my teacher support me so much, I also got a lot of support from the other student teachers in the other 5th grade class. I feel like there's so much to say to you guys, and like this video is already pretty long, but we were super collaborative, and I had never known like how awesome it is to be as collaborative as like we got to experience. We're always working together, and even for example, when there was like 3 student teachers of us and we're like, okay, you're teaching math that day, I'm teaching reading this day, one of us would make, for example, all the shared reading slides, another of us would make all the math slides, another one would make the writing slides. So we all did a little bit of everything, so we weren't all overwhelmed. Like, I could not even imagine if everything was on just me, and I probably would be at the school until 5 or 6 if I had everything on me every single day. But I always left at 3 like every single day. I think the longest I ever stayed there was like 4:30, and it's because most of the time I was actually like just like talking instead of being productive. But yeah, because we like shared and we're really collaborative, it was super easy. So if you guys are student teaching, like, highly recommend like talk with your other student teachers who are in the same grade level. If you guys are already grade level team, like, do your best to not put it all on you, because it would have been extremely hard, and it was really great to bounce ideas off each other and ask questions like, hey, you think we should do this instead? And like, it just was really nice, and I didn't feel stressed at all because I knew that I had that support from the other student teachers. So before I had to teach a lesson, I could talk to them and be like, okay, how are you going to teach this? Because I was thinking of doing it this way, and then being like, oh yeah, you know what, that probably would be a better idea. So it was great getting to learn from that, and knowing that when I do teach, I do want to 100% work in a collaborative environment, because it was just very helpful for me, and being like as productive as I could be, and giving all my energy to the students and not being stressed out every day. So that's one thing. Within the 2 weeks before I finished my student teaching, we did get another student teacher placed in my classroom. So I ended up working with another student teacher, and that also ended up being great because I knew her, we were friends before. So we just all got along so well, we were all friends. So then the workload from what I was used to doing ended up becoming a lot less. So I wasn't like having to worry about teaching a new lesson every single day. We split up our days. So the days where she was teaching, I was making lessons for the days I taught, and like on the computer, and vice versa. So again, it wasn't like I had to teach every single day. So the weight was lifted off my shoulders when she came, because I was like, oh my gosh, like this is so chill. So ended up being such a great experience. Like, I just remembered when I was ending, like being so sad and thinking about how far I had come from like the first week, being super overwhelmed, having a couple breakdowns, and thinking like, oh my gosh, this is gonna be a crazy semester, because throughout that time I was able to balance out like a social life and school, and it was so nice because it was something that I didn't think I was gonna have or get to do. And with all the YouTube videos I had watched, seeing how stressed people were, or like how bad of a connection that they had with their mentor teacher, and even not even YouTube videos I watched, just even people I knew sharing their experiences, and it not being as smooth sailing as mine, I was just, wow, I was just always thinking like, and being so grateful that I got so lucky that I got an amazing mentor teacher who helped me so much, and other 5th grade teacher team that was so supportive and amazing. And then of course the student teachers, of course my students were also amazing, never had behavior issues, which was really great. We just got so lucky, because my teacher would always tell us stories about different challenges or things you would have to deal with, or how she has dealt with, and how you would handle those situations. We never experienced that, so I got to just fully teach without having to deal with that. But I know eventually that's going to be something that I want to focus on a lot, is like classroom management, since I didn't really struggle with that much. And I think it also has to do a lot with it being virtual, like 75% of the school year, and the students not being fully like knowing how to interact with one another. So that I think is another huge contributing factor. But overall, I just really, really enjoyed and loved my student teaching experience. And if you guys are going to start it soon, either this semester or the following semester, good luck to you guys, and please reach out if you guys have any questions. I do have a teacher Instagram. It's at amandamonroee, where you guys can specifically DM me there on anything you guys have questions about or need support in. I'm going into my master's program for teaching in the fall, so probably be busy at that same time, but if you have any questions now, let me know. I think I want to film a video if you guys do have any more questions specifically about my student teaching experience that I didn't get to. Please reach out, because I think I eventually want to do that, because like I said, there's just so much, because it was like a 66-day experience that I'm sure I definitely did not cover a lot. I just did an overall general idea of what my experience was like. But there are so many things, like about your supervisor, having meetings with your supervisor, getting watched when you do your lessons, interacting with the principal. I feel like there's just so much. If you guys want me to film another video about student teaching and answering any of your questions, please let me know. But I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. If you guys enjoyed it, be sure to give me a thumbs up and subscribe down below if you haven't already. And I'll see you on my next video. Bye, guys. We'll be right back.